Welcome to Milestone Moments, the show where we explore the journeys that lead to success. I'm Sheila Slick, your host and founder of 5 Milestones. In every episode, we will bring you insights from the minds of entrepreneurs, leaders, and experts who will share not just their expertise, but the milestone moments that have reshaped their journeys and led to significant achievements. So if you're looking for motivation, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and discover the milestones that mark the path to success. Welcome to another episode of Milestone Moments in Business and Leadership. I'm Sheila Slick, your host, and joining us today is Mike Tedasco, a seasoned expert in innovation and leadership. Mike is currently a visiting fellow at the James Silberrod Brown Center for Artificial Intelligence at San Diego State University. Previously, he served as the Senior Director of Innovation at PayPal, where he led transformative initiatives in technology and business strategy. With a wealth of experience in fostering innovation and empowering future leaders, Mike brings valuable insights on leadership, workforce development, and the role of technology in shaping the future. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Sheila, thank you for the kind intro. Let's try and empower your audience today. Let's do that. So I'm excited about this chat.
Me too. I don't even know where to start. So let's start with PayPal, right? Because
Sure.
we're in an era where innovation and AI is such a big part of our lives, and a lot of people don't know how to navigate it or they have fear. So tell us a little bit about what you do and what you did.
Yeah. Well, let me start with PayPal, and then we'll get into more in what I do today after that. So I joined PayPal after a failed startup. I was out of my MBA program while everybody else was getting a job as a consultant or whatever. I'm like, I'm going to start a comic book company because why not? That was literally my plan after that. And after doing that for 2 years, I'm like, this is not getting me to where I want to be. Like there was, many successes, but it was always, a step forward and 2 steps back with it. And after a couple of years of doing, I'm like, okay, I need to find something else. I was a customer of PayPal. That's what I was using to process my payments on the e-commerce site that I built. And it was a very logical. I had a lot of classmates that worked there. So when PayPal had this job on the mobile team, this was back in 2011. I was like, cool, mobile is exciting. There's a real future in that and so forth. So I jumped on it. And for whatever reason, they hired me. And I was my plan was to be at the company for a year. I wound up being there for 11 years. And the first half was in various roles within the product world. And I could talk more about what that means. And the back half was running innovation, and which was super fun. As I like to tell people, every Sunday night, I was basically just excited to go to work the next day because the job was awesome. It was so exciting, so much fun, and I loved it, and I just had a wonderful 11 years there.
Well, 11 years is a long time.
It is.
So let's go back to that failure that you spoke about. And I want to bring that up because
Yeah.
even today, right, with AI, you have so many people either looking to start a side gig or wanting to go in entrepreneurship. And I see software as a service just growing and growing and growing and growing. And I see a lot of founders wondering, how do I take this to that next level? And we all know that startups have a very high failure rate,
Yeah.
and failure isn't always bad. So tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about that and how you overcame it and how you see failure in general.
Failure isn't bad as long as you learn from it, and that's the big thing. And I think within organizations, I think that's often tough because failure impacts your bonus. Failure impacts the perception that others have with you within the company. And one thing, and I'll get to my start, but one thing that we were actually doing at PayPal, in fact, this was right before COVID, we were building something that was inspired by Ben and Jerry's. Ben and Jerry's at their headquarters out in Vermont, they actually have what's known as a failure graveyard or an ice cream graveyard. So in front of their headquarters, they have little tombstones set up for all of the flavors of ice cream that they no longer make. And why do they do that? Well, it serves as a couple things. One, it's almost ceremonious to be able to put that out there. Like, it's like, hey, it's okay. We tried something and, it's putting it out there. And it's also like a little bit of a reminder that it's okay to do these things. Like, we want to be a company where that's allowed because if you're not failing, you're just not trying hard enough. Like, look, if you're applying to colleges and you get into every school that you apply to, you probably should have actually tried to apply to some other colleges, maybe the next tier above that or something. Like, I mean, for the most part, or like you're so great that you should have just applied to the one and gotten in. I mean, you did something wrong in the process there. Like failure is part of just everything that we do. And it's just, again, as long as you're learning from that, it's just a signal for everything else. So PayPal, we were literally making a like we one day went to the store, we bought like these like model train size people and all that, and we're building a scaled down version about the size of a large conference room table of the PayPal campus where we're going to have QR codes of all the different failed products of the past with the the creators of those products telling the story about them. And so that was going to be our little failure graveyard that we had there. And it was very resonant with me. I was on a product at PayPal called PayPal Beacon, and it was an amazing technology. It got me into the world of patents, got me into all this stuff. It was way, way, way ahead of its time. If anybody goes on YouTube, type in PayPal Beacon, and you could see something from 12 years ago where we were building this and was basically a hands-free way to pay for stuff in stores. And, you literally didn't have to take your phone out of your purse or your pocket. You would walk in, it would identify you. If you're going to a Starbucks, it could even just see that you're pulling into the parking lot, and maybe you get the same thing every time, and it would anticipate that through machine learning techniques and have your coffee ready for you before you even walk into the store. A lot of interesting things like that. It wasn't the right time. Like we demoed this at Stanford University, right up the street from PayPal office. A lot of tech friendly people there on University Avenue. We had relationships with a few of the merchants on the street. And when I would talk to students about it, they're like, why would I ever use my phone to buy something in a store? That was literally the answer that we were getting again and again in 2013. It failed. It failed miserably. The world wasn't ready for that. It was cool technology, but we weren't solving a problem that people had at that time. But, if you remind people of that, if I was at PayPal today, I'd be like, hey, remember that thing we did 10 years ago? Why are we not doing that today? The world's a different place. Like, can't we learn from that and do that? Like, that's why you just don't sweep these under the rug, act like these things don't happen because, a lot of failure is just timing. I mean, Apple was not the first company that came up with a touchscreen for a phone device and so forth. Like, there was General Magic did this in the 1990s. The 90s were not a time. The cell phone networks were not ready for this. Like there was, I mean, it was just timing. But if you kind of repackage that in a different time, a failure turns into a huge success.
Yeah, even in social media, when I see TikTok,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, this was Vine like a
Yeah.
decade ago,
Vine. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Vine, like it existed and then it ceased to exist. Yeah. So I'm like, is it the algorithm? What makes a very similar product succeed versus the other one? And Vine, I think, was from Twitter. And so it wasn't like a little tiny
Yeah.
enterprise. Twitter was pretty big at the time when they
Yeah.
introduced Vine.
Yeah, and you never know. I mean, and that's why you have to experiment because there isn't just one solution of, hey, this is how I'm going to build a product that's going to succeed. Hey, this is the type of video or post that the algorithm's going to love that's going to get me, 100,000 likes or whatever it is. Whatever it is you're going like, there's always experimentation. Frankly, that's what makes all this stuff fun. But if you're not experimenting, if you're just doing the same thing and so forth, you're going to miss a lot because the world that we're in now is changing fast. I was teaching an AI class earlier this week, two sessions, a Monday session and a Wednesday session. On Monday, I presented one deck. Wednesday afternoon, before I was teaching, I actually had to go back and change about 10% of all the content that I had in there because in the last 48 hours, the world changed enough. I'm like, oh God, that stuff I was talking about on Monday is now out of date. And I'm not joking. And I told the class this. I'm like, you are actually getting different material than on Monday. Like, that's the world that we're in. And frankly, if you're always just assuming, hey, what we're doing is fine, we're not experimenting, we're not doing all this other stuff, you are going to miss out on these vast quick changes that we're going to start to see in our society.
So let's talk a little bit about those changes. I'd love to
Sure.
pick your brain because I think it's more important than ever to adapt. It's disrupting at an unprecedented pace. The technology, I personally had heard machine learning. I don't know that I quite understand machine learning. It's kind of like the machine continues to learn on its own, right? Like it's going
Yeah.
from A to B and it'll just keep testing how to get from A to B faster. That's how I understand machine learning. So if you can explain
Yeah, I'd love to.
some of this AI so the general population that's not a techie, we can
Yeah,
understand.
look, and I'm not a techie either. That's a great thing about this. Again, I started in finance and accounting way back in the day. So like that's why I love to explain things to, as I say, normal folks like myself who might not be engineers. So I think there's traditional computing and then there's kind of artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of these things. Those are the two buckets. Traditional computing, you tell a very specific code and you say, print hello world, and the words hello world will show up on your screen. And it goes down to binary and all this stuff, but that's how traditional computing works. It is going to do that 100% of the time when it is running that code. It is going to give you the exact result that you were looking for. The world that we're in with AI and machine learning today, and specifically with large language models, this would be ChatGPT and Claude and all those, they work differently than that. How they work is they're trained on a whole bunch of data. Like imagine just all the data that's on the internet. Every single word that's ever been written on the internet is trained in these models. What they're doing is they're finding patterns in there. And they do this through something called tokens. So it's kind of like a representative for a word, largely speaking. And they just look at patterns in this. So if I said to anybody, Mary had a little blank, most people are going to say, well, the next word should be lamb as part of that because we know that. That's well known. Mary had a little lamb and so forth. The AI model will know this too. You could type in Mary had a little, what do you think's the next word? And any AI model is going to return lamb, but it's not always going to return lamb. It's going to return it 99% of the time or something like that because this is all mathematical calculations. So because sometimes people have, and this is all based on what people have written in the past. They may have written Mary had a little Volkswagen Beetle or something, or whatever it might be. And it's just looking at these connections. It's next word prediction. Now it's doing that to the nth degree. I mean, 15 years ago, it was revolutionary when it would predict your next word in an email and that you could actually do that on an iPhone. I think SwiftKey was one of the first companies that did that. And you'd be typing and it would say, okay, here's the next word. This is what it's doing is saying not just the next word, here are the next 1,000 words, here are the next whatever. It's making it has gone become so much more advanced. But these are just all mathematical probabilities. It's a mathematical probability based on data that it's seen of what the next word is going to be. And that at a very basic level is how the large language models, ChatGPT, all of those that everyone uses today, that's how those things work.
So how can we better prepare ourselves today for the next, I don't even know if 10 years, right? Can we just talk maybe 5 years? What should we be doing as small business owners or as professionals to make sure that we're still relevant?
Let's talk 5 months, even, just to be completely honest. But let's start there. So here's what I would say. And again, I always like to put out this disclaimer. I don't own shares in OpenAI or Anthropic. I intentionally don't. So I have no stake in this. It sounds like I'm a salesperson for these companies. There's a lot of good they do. There's a lot of downsides in this. We could get to that later if you want. But I just do want to preface with this. That said, you need to be using these tools. Full stop. If you are not already using ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is in any of these aspects of your business, you're falling behind. And that's the honest truth. These models are going to get better, but like you need to play with them. You need to kind of understand how they work and how they operate to see how they're going to be able to help you out. One of the hard things about this type of software versus all the other software you've had before is that the possibilities that you can do with these models are infinite. And when most people have infinite possibilities, they just freeze up. They decide to do nothing. Excel didn't have that. Well, you type something in this one, and there's a formula here. You can kind of see how things are connected to that. There are just unlimited possibilities with what you can do with these models. So what I always tell people is start with your personal life. If you're not familiar, just like literally make it your default search engine. Take a company like Perplexity, make that default your default search engine. It's an AI model. It's great. And you will find, oh, you can ask much more elaborate questions. You will be able to do this. You'll be able to do all these other things instead of searching in Google as you traditionally did in a way that's much more advanced. You sign up for the $20 a month ChatGPT version, and you could get something called advanced voice mode. It's amazing. I use it all the time. I use it for driving in the car to school. I will have it question my kids have a test or something, and I'll say, "Hey, my daughter has a test, fifth grade level, U.S. history, Revolutionary War. Ask increasingly difficult questions. Make a multiple choice. Have her answer them. Go." And we'll do that, and we'll have it going through the speakers in the car, and it'll just start asking these questions for that, whatever you want to do. I will go on long walks with it. Ask it questions, brainstorm things, think about what's on my to-do list, or there's a problem I'm trying to work through. And the great thing is, like, it transcribes everything. So I can even say at the end, hey, can you summarize everything we talked about? Can you give me just the key takeaways of everything that we discussed as part of this? And it will bring all of that together in one place. Again, or you're a small business owner, you get a bunch of contracts coming in. One of my favorite things to do whenever I get a contract, I'll throw that into something like Claude and I'll say, hey, I just got this contract. Is there anything unusual in this? Is there anything that is not custom in this contract or out of the ordinary? And it knows that kind of stuff pretty well and might say, well, this is a little bit weird, but like, yeah, for the most part, this is a pretty standard contract. I'm like, great. Now, if this was like a $10 million contract I'm going to sign, I am probably going to hire a lawyer. But for most things, like to get an answer in 30 seconds on that, like that's pretty incredible. Like, okay, I'm not going to read through that. I'm going to do this. If it does, if I'm concerned, I might throw it through a couple different models. I might ask ChatGPT and Claude and Grok and whatever the exact same question and just kind of triangulate and see, does anybody notice anything wrong here? But like those are all things you can start to do. And again, the problem is it's infinite things you can do. And that's why you just have to start working for that with them and find out what is the best thing for you and dealing with these models and how it's going to help you most. Because these are just tools for us to use.
So that's the now.
Yeah.
And where do you see this in 5 years?
The only job that I know that's going to exist in 5 years is a solopreneur. That when I talk to students 2 years ago, when I was talking to students that were graduating, I would say to them, hey, just learn these AI tools. It's 2023. Learn these tools, and you're going to go in there, and your coworkers are going to look at you like a god because you're able to do all these magical things in a fraction of the time that they can. Like right now in coding, for example, if you're not using AI to code, like I don't know what to even say because like it's just going to be that much more difficult. It's not perfect, but the new Gemini that Google has put out, we were doing this just last night in our class. We had people coding up games that they were playing within 3 minutes. And they were just like putting in prompts. This is vibe coding. They're just talking in English. They're doing this. They're seeing that, and they're seeing the magic behind this. Now, it's not as complex as a game that you're going to pay, 30, 40, $50 for or something like that, but it's something and it's customized. Like somebody was actually making a game. She was making a game for her boyfriend. She's like, oh my God, he's going to love this. Like, and it was like, oh, it was super personal. Like you can do that kind of stuff now. All of these tools. Sorry, I'm getting totally sidetracked, Sheila. I mean, I get excited about this. What was the question again? Bring me back.
You had me like in a daze, just learned it. No, it was, where do you see it in 5 years?
Yeah, 5 years from now. Sorry. Solopreneur. That's where I was going. Thank you. But when I talk to these students today, I say, like, you already have the concept of AI agents, and these work decently well. And the difference between like ChatGPT and an agent is effectively an agent, you're just going to give like high level guidelines and say something like, hey, I need you to research the Minneapolis market for me on houses that are under the Zillow value within 10 miles of this location, within this kind of school district, and they have no pink inside the house. Whatever it is, or something like that. there's no way you could do that with a search query. And to actually do that would take a ton of time. But these AI agents can do that. And probably within 30 minutes, they would take, 2 days of work, come back to you and say, like, okay, here are the results. And you look over those results. It might only be 90, 95% accurate, but it's going to save you a ton of time with that. This is growing exponentially right now. So, taking what I described there, you would be able to then apply this kind of agent concept to just about anything. It's like, hey, this file, or actually, you could probably even say within a couple of years, hey, in my email are all of the receipts I have for invoices that I've received over the last year. I want you to go through my email, find all of those, categorize them in proper categories, put them into our accounting ledger, and go ahead and do a first draft of my taxes. That's probably a year or so away, maybe 2 years, like literally what I just described there. So that's why when I tell students now, the only job that I know that's going to exist in 5 years, it's probably something like, a solopreneur. The example I gave last night is like, say your passion is golf course maintenance. Like you can build a piece of custom software that is going to specifically serve, the maintenance needs of golf courses. Like nobody's probably building that software today. It's too hard, too difficult, too whatever to do. You can do that. You could package that. You could customize that, and you could sell it to, a fraction of the golf courses across the US. You'd be hyper focused on serving their needs. If anything goes wrong, and this is one of the key things, because if something goes wrong, like if they built that themselves, if something goes wrong, they're not going to call Sam Altman at OpenAI and say, hey, Sam, this is broken. Like they got to figure it out. The agents got to figure it out. Often people want to have, and that's not going to change. People are going to want to have a human at some point in the loop to talk about. And that's why I really believe like a solopreneur who is hyper focused on building a solution for a specific customer set is going to be the one business that I know is going to exist 5 years from now. Everything else is kind of up in the air.
What about physical robots? So even
Oh
that same
gosh.
golf course, it needs
Yeah.
the grass cut, and the computer, that little AI agent can't cut the grass.
Yeah.
So how far are we from seeing more robots taking over some of the actual labor involved in some of these professions?
Sheila, I'm going to show my age here. My first house that my wife and I bought was in 2004. And this was in Ohio. And there was a company called Friendly Robotics. They were based out of Israel. And I had them ship to me a grass cutting robot in 2004. So this was over 20 years ago. I actually had one of these. As you can imagine, this was like in, Cincinnati, Ohio, in the suburbs. I was the weird guy on the street because I had a grass cutting robot while everyone else was pushing their things. I would hit a button and the thing would just go kind of like a Roomba out there. It didn't do a great job, but this is also 20 some years ago. Fast forward to just last week. I was at NVIDIA's GTC, which is their big conference that they have here in San Jose, like 25,000 people there. I could not even tell you the amount of different robots that I saw there. All of these companies building these robots and so forth. Figure Tesla with the Optimus. There was a Disney robot that Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, had on stage. There's a lot coming in robotics for sure. It's a little bit further off than the software side because there's some more risks to robots. If the robot falls on somebody or whatever. Like there was a company called Nightscope. They're still around. They had a security robot. Several years ago at the Stanford Mall, the security robot rolled over a kid's arm. Like the kid was lying behind the robot or something. They didn't plan for that. That's hard, but that's also a real problem to have that. There's much less risk in software than there is with robots. So robots will come. I would say if you're in something that really requires non-repetitive physical work in some way, that's hard. I was talking to a founder recently who was working on a robot that would be doing stuff like cleaning, and he was telling me how hard it is to get the thing to fold sheets, like to make a bed. Super difficult. I mean, if you really think about how precise that is, and he's like that to him is the holy grail, is to be able to actually make a bed. for that. Because there's just so many variables in that, and have it do it somewhat efficiently and not just take like a half hour to make a bed. Those robots will get that, but that's probably a little bit further away. That probably is like 5+ years away to like get to that level. It will happen in our lifetimes, not as quickly as some of the things that are more software related.
So, since you have evangelized creativity to employees of every nation, what
Yeah.
is one effective technique that you can recommend to spark innovation in our everyday work?
So here's one thing I believed when I was at PayPal. It became our slogan, something that like I believe strongly to this day. We are all innovators. Everyone can innovate, is what we would always say. And it didn't matter what your function was, what your background was. We are innovators by just like the nature of us as part of our species. This is how we got to where we're at today in society. The key to innovation often is just having the freedom to make mistakes, as we talked about before, and even just the constraints or even the incentives around creating an environment of innovation. If you're not going to be rewarded for this, if you're going to be knocked for failing or for whatever it might be, there is not going to be there's not going to be creativity. I think Maya Angelou has a quote like saying that we're all creative people until the age of 8, when we basically had it like knocked out of us, beaten out of us, or whatever the quote is from her. And like you think about that, like schools often do that. I mean, it's always like there's an answer, there's one right answer. Like, not all teachers are like that, but a lot of just the regiment of school and so forth does that. And look, I think that's good to have in life, but I think there's also time for creativity. And so one thing I would recommend, actually, I'll tell a story. In fact, somebody I used to know at PayPal. This guy was straight out of college. I was running innovation. One of the things in the innovation we did was file patents. And he was like, well, I want a patent. Like, that seems cool. I want to be able to do that. So what he did was he put aside 30 minutes every day to just come up with ideas for stuff. And he would actually do this while watching episodes of The Office. That was like his mental thing. I think he had seen The Office many times, so it was almost mindless for him. So he would put on The Office. It was kind of chill time. He had a notebook and he would just write down ideas. And, at the end of that 30 minutes, he would send a few to me. He's like, hey, I got anything here. From what I remember, like, I think the first 10, 15 things, I'm like, no, 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 this is not it. Like more of this, less of this, more of this, less of this, more of this. Like, okay, okay. And he just kept iterating again and again and again, just through each part of the process, and had, sort of a coach in me to just kind of like give little tweaks of guidance, but he stuck with it. He's persistent. A lot of innovation is just being persistent with something, to be completely honest. But he did this for probably months and he got his first patent. And you know what? He kind of started to unlock the code of that. I think within probably 6 months of starting, he had actually filed like 15, 20 patents that have been granted since by the US Patent Trademark Office. Within like a year from the point he kind of figured it out, that next year, he was just able to do all these amazing things. And it comes from just persistence. So, finding a way, like prioritizing it, setting some time aside where he can actually do that, prioritizing that work, getting a little bit better every time. Like if you're not making, 1% improvements in what you're doing, then it's not going to be helpful. Put all of those things together and you got somebody who is, able to do his goal and much more within a relatively short amount of time.
Consistency, persist,
Yeah.
persist.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, so what is your next milestone?
My next milestone? Wow. Um, the thing I'm working on right now, and I'm almost finished, I'm super excited about. I'm actually writing a series of children's books. And for me, so I have a publisher. They're going to release those in late 2026. So they're quite some time out, but they've been a little bit of they go deep into the sciences. So there are fables about the periodic table. It is literally called periodic fables is part of that, and there are three different stories they're going to release. And for me, That's going to be a huge, exciting thing. Being a published author in an area that I'm not a chemist by any stretch. So I had to learn a lot through that. It was just wonderful just going through that whole process. And to me, like life is a bunch of these little experiments where you learn stuff and you bring it to other things in life. And I just love that. So that I guess that's my next milestone.
You had done comic books. That's how we began the conversation. How is
Yeah.
this different than comic books? And what are you going to apply from that failure of the comic book to the children's book?
Such a good question. So the comic book business side, so I wasn't actually I'm not an artist either. I'm not an engineer. I'm not an artist. I'm just a jack of all trades, master of none is basically what I am. But what I was actually building back in 2009, it was called Sketch Maven. It was a marketplace for comic book artwork. So it was a place where artists can actually come, sell their artwork and so forth, and people would buy them and so forth as part of that. But one of the things I learned just, and frankly, spending a lot of time in this world was just like layout, design. I've looked at thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe, I don't know, of comic pages in my lifetime, and just understanding the layout, how to tell a story, things like the passage of time within a comic book. I think in the great book, if anybody's interested, Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, it's probably came out in the 90s. But I remember this so well. Like McLeod talks about, like literally the space that you have in between panels conveys different things to the audience. And so that actually might convey more of a passage of time versus less, and all these things. It's a completely different and unique art form that's nobody out there has mastered. There's so many different techniques. There are different cultural perceptions in this world, and for me, yeah, I think just spending a lot of time with artists, with people in this world has given me a whole appreciation that I'm trying to, as a writer, convey some of that to the wonderful artists that I'm working with on the piece.
Interesting. Well, it was a marketplace. I love the chemistry because so many kids struggle with science or chemistry.
I did. I
I
surely
love,
did.
I love math and I love technology. And in the sciences, it's not my forte, right?
Yeah.
So I'd probably be a great candidate to perhaps try the periodic fables
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
see if they stick with me. Where my daughter right now is getting a PhD in integrative biology, and I'm like,
Whoa.
yeah, I'm constantly reminding her, and I'm like, the key is to be able to explain to me what you do, what you're studying, and the effects, and just
Yeah.
the basics. And when did I study the periodic table? I think I was in 10th grade.
Well, I mean, and that's something that comes over time. And I think Richard Feynman, the scientist, has a quote about this of like, mastery of a subject is being able to explain that to anybody. And that is one of the things large language models do amazingly well. You could put a document into something like Google's Notebook LM and say, hey, I don't get this. This is a white paper about dark matter or something like that. I don't understand any of this. Explain this to me as if I was in sixth grade. And it could do that, and you're like, okay, I think I get it. Now let's do ninth grade. Let's do that. And that's one of the wonderful things about AI tools is they're infinitely patient. You can just keep on doing this with them until you really get it at the level that you're comfortable with as well. And that's a technique I still use all the time. I was just asking it the other day about, wait, what was I asking about? I asked it about how things work all the time. I was asking about how toilets work the other day because I was like, oh, I actually really don't know how a toilet works. And it's almost embarrassing, but I'm like, I don't know. And I was even asking it the other day, how does a calculator work? I have no idea. You just push numbers in there and somehow it gives you the answer. Well, how does that actually happen? For people who are curious, and gosh, like I hope everybody out there is curious. That's why you're listening to this pod and watching it, and you're learning. You want to learn more. You want to make yourself better. Like for people who are infinitely curious, like these tools are amazing to be able to use to just ask questions about like I'll be walking around and I'll see something like that looks industrial. I'm like, what the heck is that thing? I'll take a picture of it and say, what is this? Is this like for water? What does it do? And it'll explain it to you. Like it's great.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Mike.
Pleasure. Pleasure, Sheila. No, it's great having you. Great conversation.
And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Milestone Moments in Business and Leadership. Until next time.